And hello, hi. Well, being a few minutes late has given everyone their chance to get their wine, organic red. Very nice, Diane. It is such a joy and a pleasure to be here. And if I would normally have been flustered by technical mishaps, this is an event where this book of all books gives one perspective and such joy that I'm just really excited to be here. So in a moment, I'll bring our speaker Anne up on the screen, but I just wanted to say a few words for those of you who don't know Anne. Anne Pia is an award-winning writer and poet, perhaps best known for her creative and critically acclaimed memoir, Language of My Choosing. She, as you would expect from a poet and a great lover of music, and a woman of many and eclectic tastes, and a great ranging career, here is a book that is essays with an element of memoir, a good deal of poetry, life writing, and all of those are jumping off points to explore the bigger idea and the moments in history. And I'd just like to share this wonderful quote from the poet Janette Ayachi. Pia shows us that pilgrimages to places of the past are important stations to stop at, but planning the next odyssey into the future of possibilities can also be beneficial. So here we have Keeping Away the Spiders, full of hope and possibility. And now to join me on the screen, I have Anne. Please, everyone, woo! Hurrah, here we are. So I'm going to get us started by asking a little bit about how this particular book, if you can just set the scene, what is this book to you and how did it come about?
This book, I suppose, says, first of all, Mary, thank you very much for that amazing introduction. That was fantastic. Thank you so much. And thanks for having me. The book says, I think, what I was too coy about saying in Language of My Choosing. Okay. I say things much more explicitly in this. But the fundamental driving principles are there, which is that nothing is solid, everything disappears, our world has gone, hopefully it'll come back in some kind of way. We disappear, we go to dust, ashes to ashes and dust to dust, all of that. So Buddhist principle, the sense of impermanence, if you like, and also that identity, who we are, is within our own grasp and our own choices. Mm-hmm. So we must never feel, if we act the victim, we will never get out of where we are. We have to constantly find ways of overcoming things. So, and the other, I think, what really the book was really about, I suppose, is finding joy, but being pursued by anxiety constantly in one's life or difficulties, and finding joy as kind of a place to touch some kind of solidity and reality, or some kind of feel good to escape that anxiety. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. And I think what's extraordinary is the way you bring all of those things together in such a little book. Picking up on some of that, this was, for all that it feels so prescient, this was a book that you finished before COVID hit last year.
Yeah.
And even then you were meditating on that sense of, the old-fashioned making lemonade out of lemons, but this idea that life, you get dealt a certain hand, and you have a great appreciation and awareness for how different that dealt hand can be and is for everyone. But it's, what do we do with that? What do we do with the life before us? And so if I could just pick up on a few things throughout, but just to get to know you a little bit more. one of the recurring elements of the book is food. And you write, there's so much healing in a plate or a pot, and food is sort of communion or connection. Perhaps in a non-COVID time, we would have been sitting around a table in the bookshop with a big pot of pasta. And so if you could tell us a little bit about who you are, and what food and your heritage as an Italian Scot means to you.
Well, to me, food is, it's a way of loving people. It's a way of people bonding. Mm-hmm. It's a way of people relaxing and being themselves. And actually, I think gluttony is a wonderful thing. I think that people who slurp and, dig into their food is wonderful. I watch Jamie Oliver sitting at a table with all these Italians and the noise around him, and I get tearful at the wonderful exchanges and the kind of just sense of communion and solidarity and intimacy that food brings. But I also think, and it's in the book, that food, apart from being a political issue and a very social issue, I think it's a game changer in terms of who we can be. It opens doors, but we have to have a sense of adventure for that. We have to have a willingness to explore. In other words, what I'm saying is, we don't go abroad and stick to what we know. What we do is we go to other countries and we eat the food of that country. But also, when I eat pho from Vietnam, or I eat it here, I bow to that culture. I bow to that tradition. When I eat Moroccan food or cook it, it's the same. I want to sit cross-legged round a pot in the middle of the floor. Can't do that, but that's what I really want to do. And actually, there's a very short journey, I believe, really, between a pot of food or plate of food and changing or being somebody different. So learning a language, from a lovely roasted piece of fish in Portugal, you might well think about learning Portuguese. You might well think about adopting some of those cultures. You might well think about living in Portugal. You might well change the way you dress or the way you present to the world. So that's the trajectory really for food.
I think many of us should aspire to have your ability to leap from a piece of fish to a reimagining of self. But one of the things you do when you write about food is, as with what you write about so much in the book, is that blend of both the personal and the political. So when you say food is political, what do you mean by that?
Well, I think one of the things I say in the book is, I find Chinatown a bit of an abomination, really. I think that our society respects different cultures and the food of different cultures, where Chinese restaurants or Indian or whatever sit alongside the Jamie Oliver restaurants and the Gordon Ramsay restaurants and all the rest, to have, in a sense, certain ethnic restaurants down side streets, all side by side, to me is not actually inclusive. It's not actually respecting the culture of that country. I feel quite strongly about that.
Yeah.
So I think that's what I mean by political. And of course, things change. Funding changes, economy changes. There are times when different ethnicities are on the up and times when they're on the down, what's going on in the world, So that's what I mean by political.
Right. And in that sort of embracing of this melting pot of things that clash or things that are different, sitting together and embracing each other and embracing that difference. You also, speak a lot about in the book, but also in your writing, you are multilingual, and your writing draws on many different traditions and many different inspirations. And do you think that is because of how you see yourself and that duality as being Italian and also being deeply rooted in Scotland, as being European, or is it connected to something else that's sort of drawn you to create that melting pot in your writing and your cultural input too?
I suppose I don't really want for myself to be rooted.
Right.
I think it's important to be a pilgrim in life.
Right.
And not to be settled, to be constantly changing and evolving and finding new things. And I think that should characterize all of our years on this earth. So that's the first thing. I despair of a society that is that puts its own language first. I despair of a society that actually doesn't admit other languages and doesn't transact with other languages. I can think, for instance, of the Scottish Enlightenment and what that brought to Scotland and so on, you know. And so I'm very much in favour of a plurilanguage society. And I also think that in a language we embody different identities. It's back to identity. Identity of this, so this idea of identity being constructed, constantly being constructed, constantly being improvised and responsive. So I mean, you know, when talking Italian in my dialect, I am a woman that carries a sack of potatoes in Viticuso in the mountains of Casino. You know, I speak like that. If I'm speaking French, which I learned in Montpellier, I'm more of a madame, you know. So if I'm speaking Scots to a kid in the classroom, as I did, then I'm one of them, pal, you know. So I mean, and it's not an act; it's about an embodiment of something else, actually. You know. Does that answer?
Yes, yeah, I think so. And I think again is that sort of illustrating of these dualities, and nothing is entirely one thing or has to be one thing for long, and it can always evolve. And that's something that reoccurs throughout the book. And so I want to, as you talk about that performance, but for you, performance and self-realization and self-actualizing is a very honest way of being rather than artifice. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about maybe fashion or identity, or where those dualities are for you, and where you feel like you've pushed those boundaries for yourself.
Well, I mean, it's no secret that I'm a sexually fluid woman, you know, and I've messed around with all sorts of incarnations, if you like. You know, I've worn, and I like wearing lace and bows and strappy shoes and low-cut dresses and all of that. I like being in tails and having a bow tie or a silk shirt or whatever. And all of these things are part of a mood, if you like, or just a way. How do I want to appear in the world today? You know, what role do I want today? And they're all me. They're just different presentations of me.
And also, you talk about that. It's not just how you want to engage with the world, but how you want the world to engage with you. So, so your a dinner party, you write about not wanting to really go to this dinner party with your husband's colleagues, and deliberately wearing an outfit that in the end meant you were never invited back.
That's right. Exactly.
Is that something you've done consciously your whole life?
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, I believe, I mean, identity is something I'm very, very interested in. And there's a central core, which is the bit that pushes us on. So there is consistency in us, if you like. But apart from that central core, which keeps moving us on, we are constantly, you know, swaying back and forward and back, you know, in and out and here and there, you know. So that's the way I see identity, and that's the way I see the way we present to the world, you know, the way we dress, the way we what we eat, where we choose to be, you know. Yeah.
Who we choose to love.
Who we choose to love, absolutely. Yeah, who we are sexually, absolutely. Yeah. Yes,
if I could, one of the incredibly moving passages in the book is when you write of your youthful love affair with another young woman, and and of those feelings of love mixed up in feelings of shame and in very complex emotions. Can you tell us a little bit about that passage and why that story made it into this book in particular?
It's a key passage in the book. I grew up as a Catholic and very devout, actually. I thought about being a nun twice, not once, but twice. I think I said that to you before. And an Italian repressive background too, certain roles ascribed for women and so on. And despite myself, fell in love, tried very hard not to, and God was nowhere to be seen, really, controlling my urges. So the issue really was that as a result of that relationship, I believe that my own relationship with the world fundamentally changed, because I had to present to the world in a way that wasn't absolutely me in the end. My intimate relationships and friendships with my mother, even, were distorted in some way because I couldn't be honest. And the first feeling after making love, was one of shame and horror. And I think that's so sad, actually. I think, it just shouldn't be like that. It was about part of the times and part of my upbringing and so on. But as a result, I carried that really through many, many years, and it's only now, I think, in the past 10 years that I feel I can be absolutely who I am, that I've shed that, and I don't know if your people listening to us will identify with some of that, actually, or because in a sense we live in a very different world now. That's wonderful, that's my experience of it.
Yeah, but I think also that there is, it's still very true today that there is a great erasure of bisexuality, or an erasure of a complex relationship with sexuality, or that it might shift, or and we're uneasy with the shifting as a society, with the idea that somebody can't or isn't just one thing, or isn't that one thing forever. And for me, a lot of it did speak to me very personally. But I think one of the things you strike on is portraying something deeply personal, but then you see throughout the rest of the book that it has been so formative in your compassion for others, in your room to allow other people to simply be who they are. And your resistance time and time again to anyone saying it has to be this one thing, or you have to be. And I found that deeply amusing, specifically when you write about feminism within the context of a puritanical Scottish society, and then suddenly entering a second wave feminist space and finding a rigidity there. Can you tell us a bit about that?
And you're making my blood pressure go up immediately as soon as you said that. It's absolutely right. Society wants to norm. Is that normatize? Is that right word? People. Wants people to conform to certain ways of dressing and being and living and so on. And I found to my horror, actually, that the lesbian community, at that time, wanted to replicate a heterosexual way of life. And actually, I was never a real feminist, and never a real lesbian, never a real anything. And in a sense, I suppose I felt always unable to speak who I am to people who are bisexual, or who seem to know more, or seem to inhabit it better, or seem to do it better, somehow. So I've been quite quiet about it, quite reluctant to do my version of it, or speak my version of it. So there's something there about who holds the power, who allows other people to be who they are. I was talking to a friend recently, and she said, well, she was talking to a friend of hers, and she talked about she's a real bisexual. I thought, well, actually, thank you. What is a real bisexual? So, who dictates these things?
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, when we were last talking, I told you about my grandmother who still says, back when you were gay. You know, it's this, there was a boundary that was, and when you talk of that feminist space, and then you end up in a sort of, you end up sort of a feminist in the wilderness, because you don't stop being a feminist. You don't stop being queer when you're married. You don't stop being all these things. You were doing feminism wrong or doing queerness wrong at the time, but then you've come back to feminism or to claiming that label for yourself more recently. And I wonder why that is.
I'll tell you, I was doing an event in London, and my daughter, who was trying to kind of get the conversation going, said to me, would you call yourself a feminist? Mm-hmm. And I kind of looked at her and said, no, not really. And she looked, and then she was completely, she was irritated. She was very angry with me. So because it was a complete denial, you know, so.
Right.
So she sent me a reading list. And what I found in reading all these wonderful writers was they said exactly what I'd been thinking and living and wanting to say for all these years, you know. And I thought, oh my God, this is wonderful. How liberating this is. So yes, I am a feminist. I might not match your version of it or your version, but I am absolutely, and always have been, just living my life, doing my thing in my way, you know.
Yeah. And then raising more feminists who are clearly pot stirrers and educators, just like their mum.
Absolutely.
While we're on the subject of your daughter, and well, your daughters, family and home, and specifically there's an extraordinary, deeply, well, it was challenging, but very beautiful chapter in the book where you write of your daughter's birth and her disability and your reaction and the reaction of the world to that. And I wonder if you can tell us a bit more about, you know, what that was.
I mean, that was a very difficult, it's one of the most difficult things I think that I've had to cope with in my life. And I think Camilla as well, obviously, for obvious reasons. I think the reason I wrote that was, it's very therapeutic, obviously, for me. I wrote it exactly as it came out at 3 a.m, wouldn't have it changed. But the reason I did it was really to show how somebody can overcome the most dreadful things that happen, you know, because I talk about her gaining the wings of excellence, how she towered above all of the awful operations that she had for bone grafting, all of the mechanical contraptions that she was encased in for years. And she has become a lovely woman, and she's shown immense courage and strength and resilience, really. So when I finished the thing, I sent it to her and said, can I publish this? Is this okay? And she said, do you know, Mum, she was tearful. She said, actually, I realise we're both survivors, you know. And what I tried to bring out in that chapter too is that we had great joy in it, and so that's why it's there, and that's why there are other things here that are quite difficult, but there's always joy to be found. When we left the hospital in Sheffield and came back home, or when we left the hospital in Paris and came back home, we had joy. We opened the house, we had friends in, we drank ourselves silly. The girls were screaming with laughter and so on, and we found we had joy until the next time. You know, so I think with every difficulty, there is the possibility of the opposite too. There's joy as well.
Yeah, but I think also you strike that there's this balancing act between, you know, loving and accepting in her entirety, you know, a girl whose disability is a part of who she is, and that overcoming the overcoming is in allowing and making a space for her to be all of the things that she can be in the world.
Yeah.
rather than her becoming something else or unbecoming her disability, which is an important and I think often overlooked part of conversations around disability.
I think that's true, and in a sense, I think if I'm understanding you correctly, I never wanted Camilla to grow up with a disableist attitude to life. Mm-hmm. So it was always about, you can do it, you can overcome it. Don't, you know, let's push forward. Mm-hmm. And, I remember a very significant time when we'd gone to the Princess Margaret Rose Hospital for a regular consultation, and we were in a room full of lots of people with all sorts of different disabilities. And I looked round, and actually I said to her, do you know something, Camilla, a lot of people have much greater problems than we have, you know, and that was true, you know. So in a sense, the way we could put it in perspective. But I mean, I think the problems, of course, were people's reactions. I think, you know, obviously our good friends were very, very supportive, but the Catholic Church, I mean, the parish church, not at all, and just even talk about it, and a lot of you know, colleagues really on Paul's side weren't supportive either. So that put great stress on us, I would have to say. You felt that you were swimming against the tide, you know, you were very deserted in many ways.
Yeah. And there's that thing, nobody knows what to say or how to say it, or they're going to say it wrong, and so they opt out. It's easier to just not engage, and so which is heartbreaking. And so in amongst the myriad things, both hard, both light and heavy, that you explore in the book, I was very touched and moved to see disability and you know, your experience very personally as a mother, you know, not speaking for your daughter or for her lived experience, but what it was for you at a particular place in time, you know, and what you wanted for her as a mother, or the fears that you had as a mother, and then wrestling with, you know, what that could be in life. How have people responded, not just to that, but to the book in general, both among your friends and more widely, to so much candor in a book about so many different aspects of your life?
I think people have talked about it being an honest book and a brave book, very revealing, thought-provoking is another term that comes to mind. And you know, a book that people, I felt my friends have enjoyed, you know, people that have read it, that they felt it did actually give them a sense of well-being, I think, which is really, really important. And I wanted that to happen because I feel that often perhaps we don't explore joy enough or take advantage of possibilities for joy. And even in lockdown, I was saying to you the other night, terrible as it's been and terribly frightening as it's been, I thought we're all going to die, you know, there have been moments of great joy in very simple things, baking a cake, making cheese scones, taking a lovely walk on the Calton Hill, a lovely conversation with a neighbour you've never spoken to before that lives next door, saying when things get better, we'll get together, you know, deepening some friendships, getting to know people better. Great joy. And then, you know, other things like music has been a big thing for me during lockdown. That's given me great joy. So I think that's an important thing to hold on to seek, actually.
Yeah.
Because we have control.
Yes. And I think also there's an awareness, I think so often in our portrayals of difficult lives, whatever experiences that might be, whether that is marginalization in any way, or poverty or other kinds of deprivation, there's there's one narrative that dominates, that strips. If you are suffering, you are stripped of your humanity. You are not allowed to also be happy or also find joy or not. You get to only be one thing. And I think that what you do beautifully in the book is carving those little spaces, sort of puncturing through the blinds, just being like, we will let some light in, and who knows what it might be, but find a way to pierce through and make light. And if it's not for you, it can be for someone else. Which is something we so need.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. I mean, I suppose one of the chapters that comes to mind is about Moonstruck, where, you know, a relationship broke down, you know, and I was devastated, and I bought a tent. I didn't know what the hell to do with it. You know, I bought a tent. And I thought, well, you know, I'm just going to buy a tent and go camping, you know. And actually, my relationship was re-established, by the way. But so that's a happy. But I had months of traveling the Isles with the tent, and it was a wonderful experience, you know. And it's ever since I've gone to the Isles with a tent, you know, and take my partner too. And I mean, you know, it's that sense of nomadic kind of life has been wonderful. It's brought great joy. Again, you know, simple joys like sausages on a griddle and what colours the moon tonight and wonderful things. So yeah. We're broken relationship by tent, you know. I think, you know,
advice from Peter.
But I think also, you know, there's a bit in the book about, you know, when I'm sitting in Holy Isle having that relationship broken down, and I'm sitting in this room in my cell in Buddhist colony, thinking, you know, all there is to make things better is me. That's it. This is me. So whatever happiness, joy, what I do, that it's all going to come from me. It's just me. I can't look anywhere else, and I have to move forward using these resources, you know.
Speaking of that, because you towards the beginning of the book, you lose your religion, and you have your sort of having wrestled with Catholicism in all of the ways it impacted your life. You then have a moment where that's it, God is gone, and then you find Buddhism, and you find a different sort of relationship beyond yourself and with the world. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because it shapes a lot of your thinking. It
does, yeah. I'm not a good Buddhist though, Mary, I have to say. I'm a better Buddhist than I was a Catholic, probably. But, I find I went to Plum Village just when I retired and was very impressed, deeply moved by Thai Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese priest, who gave some teachings there and has brought a certain brand of Buddhism to the West. So that was wonderful. But I suppose the two things I take from Buddhism are this notion of impermanence and the lack of solidity and the sense of things constantly moving, never being the same from moment to moment, from day to day. And the other is the whole issue of meditation and harnessing the mind and focusing and trying to achieve a sense of nothingness in meditation. And when I was doing my doctorate, that came to the fore very much. I found it, I used to meditate every morning for 20 minutes first thing, and it gave me great clarity. It calmed me down. It took away a lot of my anxiety and gave me a sense of joy again. And there's a great Buddhist mantra about these are 24 fresh hours for you. It's wonderful to think that way. There's never been another 24 hours like these ones. And that sense of just waking up to that every morning. I wish my partner would say, I wish you would remember that sometimes. But the notion is there, you know. And the other bit about it for me was the tremendous sharing that I've experienced on Holy Isle with the community. I've been going there now for 12 years. And you step on that ground and everything disappears that you brought with you, all that baggage, and you just relate as human beings. You can relate at a deep level, or you can just pass the time of day. And you're all equal, you're all in the same position. It's a wonderful experience. I've made some wonderfully deep friends there, deep close friends. Some wonderful sharing around the fire with a bar of chocolate.
Right. Oh, for those days again.
Yes, indeed. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
I have many more questions, but I'm just going to flag to everyone watching that there is a little button in the middle of the screen down at the bottom that says ask a question, and you can click that and put in any questions that you have for Anne, and then I can read them out, and so we can have your input, and it can be a comment followed by a question, but because we're lucky we're not in a real event where you will have people, that predictable person who begins with a comment that lasts 15 minutes. I'll just skip over it if it's too long, but we'd love your comments and your thoughts, so that we can reflect on those. But while you gather your thoughts for the questions, I have a few more, because I have many notes in a very orderly fashion. This is what your book did to me, and I kept having to scribble or write "ha" in the margins of things. We have, in amongst everything that we've talked about, we've touched on, but we haven't talked about music.
No.
And that's something you sort of explore more towards the end of the book. And I wonder if you could tell us more about your relationship with music and what.
Music to me has been almost the greatest joy of all, I think, in all its presentations and characters. I grew up with it. I learned to play the piano when I was 12. I did grade 8 and blah blah. Thought about doing music as a career. Really wanted to conduct, actually. I could just see myself in Tales, with an orchestra. One of the things I used to do, actually, I see that in the book, actually, is when I was teaching, I used to have an overabundance of energy, and I used to come home after a day's teaching and conduct in a mirror with Beethoven's violin concerto, and then do the whole thing. I mean, I knew it by heart, and I loved doing that, or I would come home and dance to Rod Stewart. I mean, that was the other thing I used to just go dance on. But anyway, so I did think about doing music as a career, but then didn't feel I was advised against it, and it's been a regret really all my life. And I've come into it and left it depending on other things, like family life or career or whatever. Took up the cello when I was 41 and did reasonably well, although I'm not sure that my family would agree. And then wonderfully, when I retired, I came across the Scots Music Group, and lovely bunch of people. I heard them playing in a church one morning, church hall, and I wandered in, and as a result of that, bought a mandolin and started playing with them. And at this time in my life, no pressure. Don't need to be perfect. I can just enjoy it. I have nothing to lose here. All I need to do is get a tune from the instrument. So doing that. But that's that side of it. The other side is the glory, the sheer glory of our choral work in a wonderful concert hall, or an opera, and I do wish that opera goers would stop going around looking as if they're going to a ball, because actually it puts young people off. But it's a wonderful, wonderful expression. It's so cathartic, And even when I hear stuff on Classic FM or something, I cry. These wonderful arias, make me cry. I remember once hearing Philip Glass's violin concerto when I was driving on a motorway, and I had to actually pull off the motorway. I got so excited, at it. that's music to me.
You don't feel things by half, do you?
No. I have to say jazz too. My father was a jazz musician, and my mother said that, you know, he would get so excited at a piece, at a riff, that he would start banging his head off the chair in front of him. And I can absolutely understand that, you know, completely, you know. So,
and do you compose? Do you write music at all?
no, I've never done that. No, I haven't tried. There's enough going on. I don't think.
No, not maybe just not yet.
No.
There will be an opera maybe one day, or a collaboration with someone. Your words and their notes.
Well, I do have a friend actually who was very poetic at the time. She actually inspired me at school about her writing poetry. Was wonderful. She lives in Greece now. But we did plan to write an opera together when we were 17. We never came to anything. But that was something to go back to maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there's always time.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're certainly not one to say I'm out of time. I will not write another. How many books have you written since you started writing?
Well, there's been Language of My Choosing has been transitory. There's this book, and then there's a book coming out, The Sweetness of Demons.
Yes.
Which is a collection of poetry, my responses to the poetry of Charles Baudelaire from Les Fleurs du Mal, with translations. And that's been a tremendously exciting journey of actually exploring the depths of my sexuality, you know, great stuff. Just enjoyed it, really enjoyed it, because he's a bit of a lad, you know. I mean, he had various mistresses at different times, and enjoyed sex, you know. And I've enjoyed reading him writing about that and then responding to that. So in that work, I'm both the seducer and the seduced, depending on my mood. Excellent.
Much to look forward. More writing about sex, I think, in general. It should just be more by women, actually. That's where the gap is. We have a question from Diane, who says, we are watching from above our bookshop in Wales. I'm not sure why not our loss. We've not come across Anne's work before. So I want to ask, apart from Anne's newest book, which we plan to stock, hurrah, good for you. Is there another of your books, writings, Anne, that would make a great introduction to our readers, and why?
Well, I think Language of My Choosing would certainly do that. Because it's a book I think you could enjoy in different levels. It tells a story about the Scots Italians, stories that people didn't know, but then shows, you know, my way out of that into the life that I've chosen to live. So I think it's and it deals a lot with family relationships and you know, for the good and the bad, I suppose. But there's joy in that book too, I think. Yeah, Language of My Choosing.
And I think we'll blame the fact that it's a Scottish publisher, and we're really bad in the UK in general at you know, sort of boxing in, and I'm sure you find that in Wales, that things heading out of Wales, people go, oh, that will only be of interest to people in Wales, or here's a book about someone in Scotland, it's clearly only going to be of interest to someone in Scotland. And it's bollocks. And Anne's work is a very clear example of that. It bridges so many, you just, barriers and borders are just nonsense to you, aren't they?
Yeah, I think we operate best on boundaries, on the space between always. Yeah. That's a creative space.
Okay.
You know, if we are settled in one or the other, we become, I think, too entrenched.
Right.
The important thing is the boundary between the two, where we are challenged.
Right. How do you find the in-between?
That's a wonderful space to be.
Yeah.
Because you can create distance from one thing or the other.
Right.
And you can pick or choose what you want from there or what you want from there.
Right.
And create your own thing.
Yep.
And Richard Holloway said about the book, and encourages us to tear up all the scripts and write our own script. And I think that's how we should live our lives, really.
Yeah.
You can do that best, I think, if you take that, if you inhabit a boundary, if you inhabit the in-between.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The other.
Yeah. I think there's a growing appetite both from audiences and readers to reading those sort of liminal spaces, so those spaces that aren't quite, which I feel as a bookseller, I'm finding most exciting in a sort of reimagining of the essay, which seems such an exciting way to cover so much range. And much as reviewers will often feel the need to say, oh, it's memoir. If there's anything personal, it's got to be a memoir. And writers sort of actually just subverting that.
Yeah, that was a challenge for me because, you know, I remember my publisher saying, well, where would a bookseller put it? And, you know, and I said, well, I don't care where they put it, actually. But would it be memoir? Well, no, not really. I mean, well, would it be philosophy? Well, no, not really. And well, you know, just put it on, I mean, you know, just put it out.
Put it on the table.
Yeah, put it on the table, you know. Make it what you want, you know. It's as you said, there's a mix in there, you know, of memoir and other things.
Mm-hmm. Which I think does frighten people. I think much, you know, as we've been talking about breaking down barriers, we are so socialized and conditioned and to want to put people or things in boxes and have clear ways of understanding them. And I think there's a little sense of panic whenever we're sort of like, what is it? Who are they? What are they trying to tell me? Which I can understand. A publisher would be nervous about poking that fear. But I think maybe it means that by the time somebody opens the book, they've already broken some barrier, some boundary.
That's right. I mean, that's true. And I mean, I think what inspired me to that was hearing, is it David Mitchell talking about Cloud Atlas, you know, and somebody asked him, you know, what kind of book is it? And he said, it's just a book. And I said, well, how do you categorize? He said, well, I don't need to categorize, it's just a book, you know. And I think that was a very good thing to say, you know.
Yeah.
You make of it on the selling side. I mean, it's maybe difficult for you, but I don't know.
I mean, difficult, right? I think it's wonderful to have to challenge yourself to think differently about where a book should live. And actually, if you've got a category, why does it exist in the first place? So it's been fun over the years of running the bookshop, seeing the sort of physical landscape shift as sort of the kind of books that are out there has shifted. So,
absolutely.
So here you are, just pushing more boundaries. Maybe we'll just have to have a category that has, you know, the books that will not
that refuse to be defined.
Yeah. There's another wee question in here. So Geraldine is asking, what did motherhood mean to you? It's a big question.
It's the most important thing in my life. And I get so much joy and challenge, actually, as well, from my daughters. They keep me on the ball. They keep me alive. But I think the thing I'd say about them mainly is how forgiving they are, how forgiving your children are. All the blunders and stuff that you do, you know, and they just make me happy to be with them. I can think of no happier time, actually, really, than being with all three together. And the intimacy. I've got a wee granddaughter too now that I see every morning. I've seen her every morning through lockdown for breakfast, and that's a wonderful joy as well. And the intimacy, the new intimacy I've created with Camilla, because we're talking every morning now, so I'm very much part of her life in a way that didn't happen before. My youngest daughter is a teacher and constantly seeks my advice on various things. That's great fun. Wonderful conversations. And my middle daughter is a musician, singer, songwriter, and obviously, you know, we have great conversations. I'm too shy to play my music in front of her, though she's a lot better than me, but we have great conversations. I'm sure that I inspire when I used to take her to Leith jazz festivals, and we used to make her sit and listen to them, so just everything, sitting down at a table together, going shopping together, and shouting at one another, and just everything that, wonderful. Yeah.
You light up talking about them, and you light up on the page writing about them.
Yeah.
If I could just ask a wee follow-up on that, what has it been like, because you've come to writing in your older years after having sort of parented, do you, and you write about motherhood, have you thought about motherhood differently, putting pen to paper and looking at it through a writer's eyes?
Yes, I'm glad you asked that, Mary, because I suppose what I came to in writing Language of My Choosing was I had a very difficult start in life, really. Father alcoholic and all of that, split marriage, and violent men in my life. So I was quite timid and shy, and I think what the girls brought me was the ability to just have fun. I didn't have fun as a child, I wasn't gloried in, I was just there and rather a burden, I think, in many ways. It was after the war, and, my family was recovering from the devastation, wreaked on the Italians by the war, as, their enemy aliens, so all of that. So the girls, that sense of, going to a fun park and being silly, and having love, that kind of just exuberant love, unguarded love and joy together, talking to one another, being rollicking about, they brought me all of that. So they made up for what I'm saying is they made up for. I learned family life from them, because it was I didn't have one. Really.
But I think that there's a beauty in the way that you absorb and engage with other people, regardless of age or background or interests. You have such a curiosity about other people that seems to have also shaped your life as an educator, and being in education. And it's always two ways. You seem to be growing and picking up almost as much as you put out there.
Well, I say in one of my chapters, that the people we meet are educators. We learn from other people, and that's how we pick up things like, what university course we might do, or where we might holiday next, or what's trendy just now in terms of fashion, or I don't know, what are the trends in food at the moment, what restaurants to eat in, or whatever, what should I do with my hair, all of those things. So we learn from other people. People around us are our educators. That's actually what we're lacking at the moment. I think, we're all feeling very kind of caught in on ourselves. We're not getting enough stimulation from other people. It's other people that take us forward. It's other people that form our identities. And there's some theoretical literature about that. Markova writes about, how we meet a person, and there's a sense of taking on aspects of each other, and each of us becoming someone different. And I suppose in my own professional life, I was very strongly in favour as an inspector of us learning from teachers, as opposed to a top-down approach, which was about you're not doing this and you're not doing that. So I was very keen on the dialogues with professional people, senior professionals actually. That helped me grow, and I hope that helped them as well. So people are really important in terms of how we move forward.
Yes, it was one of the sort of the joys of the book was feeling like I was having a conversation with someone who was then passing on all these bits of all these other people that you have interacted with. And I think that's something that lockdown has left, such such a gap in all of it, you know, those tiny interactions that we have every day that matter. That suddenly you realize actually how much you get out of the little things and how much you fine tune your own ideas about something, or by being shaped by what's passing by you.
Yeah, or people's reactions to you, you know, it motivates you and it makes you think twice and throws you back on yourself. That's not a bad thing at all. And you rethink things, then you reshape them, you reconfigure them. That's really important. I agree. I also forgot to say that I did some consultancy when I retired, and did a lot of work with further education colleges and the University of the West of Scotland. We learn a lot from our learners, and I set up a project where I got the learners to tell the teachers what worked and what didn't, to tell their lecturers at university, these great intellectuals actually who were so steeped in knowledge that they didn't really care about teaching very much. And what came back was amazing. And as a result of that, they reformed their teaching and learning approaches across university. You know, so we learn a lot. That's the best staff development, is what your learners tell you. So.
Yeah. We are coming close to the end on time, and since we don't have any other questions, I wonder if you would indulge us a little bit in a wee reading from the book.
Yeah, I'll do that. Thank you.
Great specs.
Thank you. Trendy.
Very much.
I'm told anyway. The spider builds her own web. She does it unaided. Her web is intricate, complex, and often extensive. She has sole responsibility for both her web and her life's direction. Each web is complete, a new creation. She alone determines where it should be, where to locate herself. She determines its shape and spread, the relative thickness of each fibre, according to usefulness and capacity to lure and keep her prey, and how much freedom to maneuver is available to her within that space. The important thing is to survive, and with that basic requirement as a compass, on a whim, or because of other factors out with her control, she decides how long she stays in one place, moves on again and again. Spiders are capable of creating great beauty. Their artistry and craft are astonishing. Their senses always on high alert, reacting to every movement, sound, and change of air. In every place that they inhabit, they are immensely productive. From their natural resources, their genetic code and heritage, they create copious yarn of the finest silk and endless streaming, light-filled gossamer. As individuals, we have that same innate ability to create around us that same magic, that capability for what is supernatural, beyond the bounds of human capacity, that can make our lives not only valuable or meaningful, but an existence never before imagined. We are capable of great and small acts of importance, significance, grace, and beauty. While my everyday requires the energy to fulfill what is for me always an aspiration, there are and have been many days of immense struggle. I know and trust all the same that we can make history and build futures. I believe that we can always be more than we are. It is not the spiders who lie in wait for us. Our histories, experiences, whatever life throws at us, need not oppress us or darken all the years we have ahead. They will only do that if we allow them. We learn from these and believe in better. For what lies in wait for us are the years, the endless opportunities that each day offers, that each place presents, and that the person that we might meet on a chance encounter can give us. What illuminates the sky in the brightest of colours, what makes the earth warm and the sea keep singing, is a never-ending driving thrust for more, for better, for what else is available, for what else awaits.
Oh, thank you for that. It's so strange not to have an audience, to have clicking and waving. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And what a beautiful reflection of so much that is in the book. There are a couple of comments that I just want to share. Julia says, thank you so much for all the insights, being an Italian in Edinburgh and a language teacher as well. I couldn't agree more on everything you said about food, identity, language, and now education. So, yes. And then Marvin Cunningham says, after Louise Bourgeois' large spider sculpture that was featured in Tate London, I always associate the image of the spider with motherhood.
Yeah.
Ooh, I'm going to have to look that up.
Yeah. And she's right. That's true. I think that's what people say about that. That's very true. Yeah. What you can crawl under the spider and it kind of encompasses you, almost like a womb, which is wonderful.
Oh, lovely. Well, I think that's possibly all we have room for tonight. But luckily for all of you watching, keeping away the spiders and all the extraordinary wisdom and joy and possibility of this woman and this writer are in a book, and you can take it home and you can read it and dip into it. And I have to say, I'm not saying this as a bookseller. As a reader and as a woman and as a young feminist and a young queer person, especially during COVID times, this book has been a joy to live in and has been thought-provoking and candid and has been a mirror up to a lot of my own life and challenges, and a reminder that, living in someone else's head is just such a beautiful and extraordinary thing. So thank you for inviting us into your mind with these brilliant books, and may there be many more to come. And I personally am looking forward to the new book out with Vagabond Books, and we'll have it up on the website, and reading all you have to say about sex. And on that note, I think we will wrap it up. You can click to buy the book here. You can leave some comments afterwards and they'll stay up, and then we will reshare this video if you want to share it with anyone else so they can watch it at their leisure. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Anne.
A great pleasure, Mary. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
And now's that really weird, awkward moment where we're ending and I need to find the button. There we go. Good night.
Thank you.